I didn't plan on becoming a billionaire by accident, but then again, I didn't plan on getting humiliated by my own homeowners association, either. It started with a letter. A plain white envelope slid under my door one humid Thursday morning. Inside, printed in the HOA's pompous serif font, were the words that changed everything. Dear Mr. Carter, pursuant to Bylaw 42C, your dock and private island are to be considered part of the Ocean View community's shared recreational area effective immediately. I laughed at first, a short, incredulous bark that echoed through my empty kitchen. They couldn't be serious. My island, Pelican Key, wasn't community property. It was mine, bought in cash 15 years ago, deed recorded, taxes paid every damn year. But Ocean View's HOA wasn't known for logic, only control. You see, when my wife died 5 years earlier, I'd stopped attending meetings. I stopped trimming the hedges to their precise 4-foot regulation height. I stopped waving at neighbors who smiled too wide and whispered too much. To them, I had become an empty shell of man, a soft target. And when people think you're broken, they stop watching for the trap you're setting. Ocean View had changed since the days I first moved in. What was once a quiet coastal community for retirees had turned into a playground for developers, investors, and bored millionaires. The HOA board had been taken over by slick suits with connections, the kind who drove Teslas but still smelled like old money and entitlement. At the top of the food chain sat Dylan Shaw, the HOA president, a man who smiled like a shark and wore cologne that cost more than my first car. He called me that same afternoon. "Ethan, buddy," he began, his voice oily with faux warmth. "I wanted to reach out personally before we proceed. The community voted unanimously to incorporate Pelican Key into our new resort project. You'll get a lovely plaque mentioning you as the original owner. Great legacy move, right?" "Legacy?" I asked, trying to keep my tone even. "You're talking about my home." "Technically," he said, dragging out the word, "your island falls under a shared easement zone since the last coastal rezoning. It's a gray area. Nothing personal." Gray area. Those words were like kerosene. I hung up on him. That night, I pulled out every document, every deed, every coastal map I owned. I spent hours comparing boundaries, zoning updates, tax parcels. Sure enough, a sneaky change had been filed last year, a coastal zoning adjustment that had redrawn the lines by a few hundred feet, conveniently enough to overlap Pelican Key with Ocean View's HOA district. And guess who signed off as a community representative for the adjustment? Dylan Shaw. That was the moment my grief curdled into rage. Weeks passed. Construction equipment appeared across the bay, barges loaded with steel beams and prefab panels. They were really doing it, building a luxury resort on my island. Every thud of a piling hammer echoed like an insult. The HOA had partnered with a development firm called Blue Vista Properties, a billion-dollar company known for transformative coastal projects. According to the press releases, Pelican Key Resort would be a 5-star paradise featuring Ocean View suites, private cabanas, and exclusive ownership opportunities for Ocean View residents. I didn't attend the groundbreaking ceremony, but I watched from my back porch with binoculars as Dylan Shaw smiled for the cameras, shaking hands with Blue Vista's CEO. He had no idea that I was already several moves ahead. My late wife, Lydia, had been an architect, brilliant and methodical. She taught me how to think in blueprints, how to see structures not just as walls but as leverage. When she died, I kept her files, her contacts, and her strategies for land acquisitions. Over the next 6 months, I started using them. Quietly. Step 1. By the surrounding land. Ocean View's HOA only had jurisdiction within the community limits. But there were small parcels, abandoned wetlands, buffer lots, and easement tracts, just beyond those limits. I used shell companies to purchase every single one. To anyone else, they looked useless. But together, they formed a ring around Pelican Key's access point, the marina, the causeway, the underwater cable zone, even the water rights of the surrounding half-mile radius. Step 2. Wait! The resort rose from the sand like an arrogant dream, glass towers, infinity pools, polished marble lobbies. Blue Vista pumped in tens of millions. Sure, they cornered the coastal luxury market. By the time they were ready to open, they'd invested nearly $90 million into construction alone. And step 3? That was my favorite part. Once the resort was complete and the grand opening date was announced, I filed a quiet title lawsuit in federal court. My lawyer, a shark in his own right, had found a fatal flaw in their zoning transfer. Blue Vista's ownership claim was built on the HOA's paperwork, which, it turned out, wasn't legally binding for offshore land beyond municipal limits. In plain English, they built a resort on land that still belonged to me. When Dylan Shaw got the news, he stormed up my driveway in a linen suit, red-faced and sweating. "You can't do this, Ethan," he shouted, waving a stack of papers. "We invested millions. You'll ruin everything." I leaned against my railing, coffee in hand. "That's the idea. You'll never win in court. Blue Vista will bury you in legal fees." I smiled. "Maybe, or maybe they'll realize it's cheaper to pay me off." He froze. That was the moment he understood. This wasn't grief. It was revenge. The next months were a flurry of legal chaos. Blue Vista's lawyers argued, threatened, and postured, but the law was on my side. The federal judge ruled that the HOA had no authority to rezone privately deeded land, and all improvements made on that property, meaning the resort, now legally belonged to the rightful landowner. Me. Word spread like wildfire. News outlets ran headlines like "Retired engineer owns $90 million resort after legal loophole." Investors panicked. Blue Vista's stock dipped. And Dylan Shaw? He was quietly removed from the HOA board. But I wasn't finished yet. Not by a long shot. Because while the lawsuit gave me ownership, it also gave me something more powerful: leverage. Every luxury investor in the state wanted a piece of that island now. I started receiving calls, offers, proposals. That's when Blackwell Holdings reached out, a global investment firm with a reputation for turning troubled assets into gold. Their representative, a sharp-tongued woman named Evelyn, met me for lunch at a seaside cafe. "You played them beautifully," she said, sipping her espresso. "Most people would have settled early. You let them build the bait for you." "I just waited," I said. "They did all the work." She smiled. "How much to walk away?" I looked out at the island, shimmering under the sun, the glass towers, the yacht docks, the infinity pool reflecting the sky, all of it sitting on my land. "Make me an offer," I said. She slid a folder across the table. Inside, $150 million. All cash. That number hit like a thunderclap. I took the deal. Within weeks, the transfer was finalized. Blackwell Holdings took over operations, and I walked away with a bank balance that could buy an entire city block. But money wasn't the real victory. Watching Dylan Shaw's empire crumble, that was. Still, sometimes, when I sit on my porch and stare out at the water, I wonder, was it justice, or just vengeance dressed up as cleverness? Because when you destroy someone who wronged you, even if they deserve it, what part of yourself gets lost in the fire you light? It's strange how silence sounds different when you're rich. After the sale, my life became unnaturally quiet. No construction noise, no HOA meetings, no Dylan Shaw shouting on my lawn. Just a whisper of the ocean and the hum of my thoughts. People think revenge ends with a victory. That once you've crushed your enemy, you walk away smiling, vindicated. But the truth? Revenge is a fire that never sleeps. Even when it's over, it still burns, quietly, inside you. 3 months after selling Pelican Key for $150 million, I should have been happy. I'd bought a sleek modern house on a coastal bluff 20 miles north, far from the reach of any HOA. I had the kind of wealth that could make problems disappear with a phone call. But every morning, I found myself staring at the horizon where the island lay. From this distance, it looked like a jewel on the sea, perfect, serene, almost unreal. Then one evening, while flipping through the news, I saw it again. Blackwell Holdings announces Pelican Key luxury rebrand, Shaw Residences. My stomach turned. There he was, Dylan Shaw, standing beside Evelyn in a tailored suit, smiling for the cameras. "We're thrilled to announce Mr. Shaw as our new Director of Development for Pelican Key Resort," Ava said, her voice smooth as glass. "This collaboration ensures continuity and honors the community's legacy." Continuity. Legacy. Two words that tasted like poison. So, that was the game. Ava hadn't bought the island just a profit. She bought Dylan, too. Blackwell Holdings had hired him back, repackaged the resort, and erased my victory with a single press release. My phone buzzed. A private number. "Ethan Carter," a voice said. "This is Charlotte Vance from Coastal Ledger. We're running a story about the Pelican Key deal. Any comment on your partnership with Blackwell and Mr. Shaw?" "Partnership," I said, stunned. "According to corporate filings, you still hold 5% equity in the development under Carter Holdings, LLC. That was part of the acquisition contract." I'd skimmed the documents, trusting my lawyer to handle the details. I never realized they'd left a small equity clause, a thin thread that kept my name tied to that island. "Print whatever you want," I muttered, hanging up. But that night, I couldn't sleep. I kept seeing Dylan's smug smile, Ava's calculating eyes, the resort lights flickering across the waves. They had taken my revenge and polished it into a trophy of their own. So I started digging. Blackwell Holdings wasn't just a property investment firm. It was a labyrinth. Subsidiaries, offshore accounts, shell corporations spanning from Singapore to the Cayman Islands. The deeper I went, the more connections I found, and every one led back to Blue Vista Properties, the same company that had built the resort in the first place. It was a shell game. Blackwell hadn't rescued the project. They were the project. Blue Vista had simply rebranded through its own holding company, wiping away the lawsuit stain and turning my victory into their loophole. And at the center of it, Evelyn. She'd played me from the start. She'd seen a broken old man who wanted revenge and used me to clean up her company's mess. I stared at a photo in a news article, smiling, confident, untouched. Then I looked at my bank statement, $150 million staring back at me, and felt nothing. Money can't buy back your pride. It was around that time that Jared, my old neighbor, came knocking. He looked nervous, glancing around before stepping inside. "Ethan," he said, "you need to see this." He pulled out a tablet showing an online real estate forum. There, in plain sight, was a classified listing. Ocean View Community Expansion Project. Future development lots adjacent to Pelican Key. They were selling my buffer lands, the parcels I'd purchased quietly before the lawsuit. Somehow, the ownership records had been tampered with, transferring them to a new entity under Blackwell's umbrella. I froze. How the hell? "They are claiming eminent domain," Jared said. "The HOA partnered with the county for a coastal restoration initiative. They are trying to rezone the entire area again." My pulse quickened. They weren't just reviving the project. They were coming for everything I'd built, every inch of leverage I'd used to bring them down. I thought I'd beaten them, but I'd only started a bigger game. That night, I drove down to Ocean View. The gates were new, sleek black metal, security cameras blinking like mechanical eyes. When I reached the edge of the marina, I saw the resort glowing across the water. Music drifted from the island, laughter, glasses clinking, the soft pulse of a distant party. I stood there for a long time, staring across the dark waves, until headlights appeared behind me. A black SUV rolled to a stop. Evelyn stepped out, wearing a silver dress that shimmered under the moonlight. "I thought you might come," she said, walking toward me. "You're not very hard to predict." I didn't move. "You used me." She smiled faintly. "You used yourself. You wanted revenge more than justice. Ethan, you built the perfect trap, and we just walked through the open door you left." "Where's Shaw?" I asked. "Celebrating," she said. "You should be too. You made a fortune." "I made a mistake," I said, thinking I could burn the house down without choking on the smoke. Ava tilted her head. "You still have your 5%. You know, we could make that worth something again." She was right. 5% of $1 billion resort wasn't nothing. But I didn't care about money anymore. I wanted to erase what they'd built, every piece of it. "What do you want, Ethan?" she asked softly. "Another war? You'll lose this one." "Maybe," I said, "but you'll bleed for it." Her smile faded. "Be careful who you threaten. Not everyone plays fair." Then she got back in her SUV and drove away, taillights vanishing into the night. For weeks, I couldn't shake her words. Not everyone plays fair. A few nights later, a small yacht caught fire off the coast of Pelican Key. News outlets said it was an electrical fault, but whispers spread that it was sabotage, that someone had sent a warning. The next morning, I found a single envelope on my doorstep. Inside, a photo of my new home, taken from a drone. No note, no message, just a photo. The fire had started again, and this time, I wasn't the one lighting it. I went underground after that, sold off assets, hid my money through legal trusts, disappeared from the grid, let them think I'd given up. But I hadn't. If Ava and Shaw wanted to play dirty, I could play darker. Through an old contact of Lydia's, a retired city planner, I got hold of Blue Vista's upcoming expansion plans. Hidden in the paperwork was a secret no one was supposed to see. Pelican Key was built on a violation. The resort's foundations extended into a federally protected coral zone. If that information reached the right hands, the EPA, for instance, the entire property could be condemned. It was the kind of leverage that could collapse a billion-dollar empire. I drafted the report, attached the documentation, and sent it anonymously. Then I waited. 2 weeks later, the headlines hit. Federal investigation launched into Pelican Key environmental violations. Resort operations suspended pending review. Ava Lynn vanished from public sight. Dylan Shaw's name was removed from the company website. Blackwell Holdings stock plummeted overnight. I didn't celebrate. I just sat on my porch, watching the storm clouds roll in from the sea. The fire had finally gone out, but so had the light inside me. Months passed. The resort remained shuttered, half abandoned, a monument to greed and arrogance. I sometimes took my boat out near the edge of the no-entry zone and stared at the island, my island, now silent and overgrown again. One afternoon, as the sun dipped low, I noticed a figure standing on the old dock. Ava Lynn. She raised a hand in a calm wave, then called out, her voice carrying over the water. "You won. Ethan, congratulations." I didn't answer. She smiled faintly. "But tell me, did it make you happy?" The wind carried her words away before I could reply. And for once, I didn't know the answer. Sometimes I think about Lydia, about the quiet life we once dreamed of on that island. Maybe she would have told me to let it go. Maybe she would have said that revenge is just another kind of prison. But then again, maybe she'd have smiled that sly smile of haze and said, "If you're going to burn something down, at least make sure you own the ashes." And maybe that's exactly what I did.